Good morning. What's up, everybody? Welcome to a special broadcast here on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel. This will also be available on the podcast feed. So if you want to go back and listen to that, if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast player, thank you all so much for tuning in. As I mentioned, I'm Stephen Gillespie, part of the Draft Sicko show here on No Ceilings, and I'm coming to you live from Portsmouth, Virginia. I'm here on site covering the Portsmouth Invitational Tournament. And I just wanted to take a moment to share some of my thoughts on the tournament as a whole, like the infrastructure, the setup, my experience with people. Obviously wanted to bring you some keys from the games that I've watched so far and some of the players that have just really stood out to me. So I'm just so thrilled to be here. This is my first time covering this event live. I've obviously watched for a long time, and it's been everything that I've ever been told that it is. This tournament is held in a high school gym. It's not as small as the gym that I went to in very rural Arkansas, but it is a high school gym. So there's some pros and cons to that. Obviously, the con is that it's not as luxurious as what some people may be used to. Maybe some of the many NBA teams that were in the building are used to experiencing when they go somewhere. They're not going to get all the amenities that come from a D1 college or, an OTE pro day or anything like that. But the good news is that there is terrible cell phone service in that building. And the reason I say that that's a good thing is that it forces you to focus on the game. There's not as many heads in their phones or heads in their laptops, things like that. It's just overall a great experience for, they always say that summer league is like summer camp for basketball nerds. The Portsmouth Invitational Tournament is like summer camp for like draft deviants, just people who want to go scrape the bottom of the draft prospect barrel and look for anybody who could help an NBA team win on the margin. And shout out everybody who's watching. I know this is early for some of my West Coasters out there. Shout out Norin Rad in the chat said, glad I made the live show. It's been a while since that. Norin, glad to have you. And thank everybody for just taking a little bit of your morning to come hang out with me. I was able to meet some of the local media. That was really cool. I was actually asked to do a brief interview with local media just to why I'm here, what I think NBA teams get from a tournament like this, what players get from being in a tournament like this, and who I'm excited to see. So that was pretty neat. I was able to meet up with some people from the draft Twitter space as it is. And that was fun just to link up with people who I've podcasted with, maybe sometimes a couple of years ago, some people who I regularly keep up with. It's just been fun on that front. And the staff at Portsmouth is just they're salt of the earth people, just amazing people that I'm just glad I got the chance to meet up with. Now, for anybody who wants to follow the Portsmouth Invitational Tournament, this isn't a paid advertisement. I just want to give you guys some tools that you can use that can help you. If you want to keep up with box scores, first off, just go follow the Portsmouth Invitational people on social media. On Twitter, they're at P.I.T_basketball, and they give you all this stuff as well. But for the stats, you can go to statbroadcast.com, and they give you box scores, updates, things like that. And then at Prep Spin, you can actually watch these games that are streamed, from the gym. I was actually on TV, as it were, sitting in the front row watching these games. But overall, just a very fun tournament. I want to take some time to cover the games, though, obviously, and some of the players that showed off their skills, and maybe even go over some players who I honestly had very low expectations on, and they just blew those very low expectations out of the water. So the first game had a matchup by the K&D Rounds Landscaping and the Cell Systems LTD teams. Now, there's a far deviation from the typical Bulldogs or Wildcat mascot names that you're used to hearing, but the K&D Rounds team featured a team of Sean Padula, Chase Hunter, Jaden Akins, Jonas Adu, Jonathan Pierre, Nolan Hickman, Nate Santos, and Zach Fremantle. Cell Systems Ltd. featured a team of T.Y. Johnson, Wooga Poplar, Juan Roberts, David Joplin, Daniel Bacho, Kobe Sanders, Yonel Davis, and Ian Shefflin. Very fun game, very fun opening. I was excited to watch a few of these guys play. For those who are loyal to the Draft Sicko show, you will know that some of those names were drafted by my co-host Maxwell and myself. So I'll just go through and pick out most impressive players that I was just blown away by, and then these kind of pleasant surprises. Now, I'm doing the show live a little bit before it will actually drop, but over at NoCeilingsNBA.com, if you're listening on the podcast form, this will serve as a good kind of companion piece with the written work that's going to show over at NoCeilingsNBA.com. If you're watching live, that'll drop, I think, at noon Eastern. So just a couple hours away. Sean Padula for K&D Rounds Landscaping was a player that I drafted on the Sicko Bowl on our Draft Sicko show a few days ago. And the reason why I took him was because, one, he's super talented. I was comfortable with his ball handling, his vision, three-point shooting, and just overall like pesky nature that he plays the game with. And to be honest, like an exhibition like this where chemistry is far from, anything other than like a elementary level, guards can typically have a larger influence on the outcome or the performance of the team in a setting like this, because as it goes, guards are naturally ball dominant players. They set the table, they bring the ball up the court. In a less organized style of play, guards are going to have a much larger influence on the outcome of the game. And that's exactly what happened with Sean Padula. He finished with 16 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, only 1 turnover, did foul 5 times, but throughout the entire game, Padula was a heavily relied upon player. The head coach of his team was constantly communicating with Sean, specifically calling out Sean on the court to run specific actions, to get the defense to organize. If he thought that one player needed to be exploited, that was communicated specifically to Sean. And that's not an outlier thing for a point guard. I just found that of all the players that were on this team, we're talking about guys who are all lobbying to be in the NBA in front of a lot of NBA scouts. Sean was the guy that his coach trusted. He was able to really set the table early. He didn't score a lot inside the paint. He had 4 of 7 shooting from the floor, 3 of 4 from deep, 5 of 6 from the free throw line. He didn't finish in the paint, but Sean was definitely not just like a perimeter-oriented guard throughout the game. He was driving and kicking. Some of those kicks did not result in really any points, as the team as a whole was 12-36 from deep. So Sean drove and kicked. It didn't result in a lot on the stat sheet, but in my opinion, when you're evaluating a guard like this and you're wondering how he can scale up to the next level, you have to imagine that some of these three-point shooters that he's passing to in a game like this are going to be three-point specialists at the NBA level. Now, he's listed at 6'1". I tried to kind of like size myself up against him because, I'm a healthy 6 foot, and I couldn't tell from where I was in the front row to where Sean was on the court. He did feel small. There were other players that were listed slightly higher that did appear to be much taller than Sean was. So I'm sure the NBA teams are going to have like their skepticism when it comes to the physical nature, like his physical stature and how it can hold up into the NBA. But he did handle contact well. He did swing the ball. And of course, that 3 or 4 from deep was very apparent. He was not overly concerned about getting his own. And I think that if you're going to a Portsmouth Invitational Tournament to scout, I don't think that anybody's going to this game looking for the player who puts up 30 shots and saying, okay, cool, we found our superstar at Portsmouth. They're wanting to see these guys who can set up, who can organize, who hustle, and can set the table. That's what Sean did. On defense, there was a play where he shot a passing lane, converted it into a transition opportunity for his team, but he slipped around screens really well. He was able to navigate around those. He talked a lot, and that's what really stood out to me, because Sean he led his team in scoring, but it didn't feel like it was because he really wanted to get his own. He picked and chose his spots really well. Team relied upon him on and off the ball, and that's what really kind of won him the game. Now, within the rest of this game, I wouldn't say that Any of these guys are going to appear in my most impressive part of my written work, but I do want to talk on the system cell side. T.Y. Johnson, he was a late addition to this team coming out of UC Davis, I believe. One of the UCs, I don't have it in my notes, but I think it's UC Davis. Someone can fact check me, and that's okay. But T.Y. Johnson was a late addition to this game. Now, if you listen to the Draft Sicko show, I'm going to reference that a lot because we talk about Portsmouth quite a bit on that show in particular. T.Y. Johnson was a late add, and one of the things that I spoke with Maxwell on was that I think in a setting like this, T.Y. Johnson could be a bit of a wild card because he is, Norn Red in the chat, fact check me, thank you very much, UC Davis. Thank you very much. T.Y. Johnson could have been a wild card in this game because he's a bit of a one-on-one guy. He's a volume scorer, and he just has a great handle. He's kind of built for exhibition style games. So I thought that he was going to be a player who could tremendously benefit being a late addition, coming in and really showing what he can do on the offensive side of the ball. He did just that. He didn't lead the team in scoring. John L. Davis, who I'm not really going to discuss in either of these categories, and that's really no slight against him, but he did get 22 points off the 17 shots, was 1 of 6 from deep, and got 3 of those points from the free throw line. So he had a typical John L. Davis game. I don't think that he showed anything different than what the tape would show you. T.Y. Johnson, on the other hand, did. He had 19 points on 7 of 16 shooting. He was 4 of 7 from deep. Hit his only free throw attempt. He got 4 rebounds, which I was really impressed with, 2 assists to go with 2 turnovers, but a steal as well. And he played in 29 minutes. So of all the players on this team, T.Y. Johnson played the most. And he didn't really even start the game hot, nor did he really have like a large role early on in the game. Coach really rode his hot hand. He was 4 of 7 from deep. Again, not a player that was bringing the ball up court, rejecting a screen and just kind of pulling them off the dribble. He was off ball a lot. He's listed at about 6'3", 190 pounds. I don't know how true either one of those measurements are, but I would say that he was probably my most pleasant surprise from this game because, again, late addition, a guy who probably is not as high on a priority list of scouting compared to a lot of these other prospects. And every time that he hit a shot, he wasn't just a 3-point merchant. He did hit a couple really tough baskets in the paint, did not shy away from contact. I think the impression that I got from kind of reading the body language, shout out to Bill Simmons, the body language doctor, reading the body language of some of the scouts in the building is that they were really impressed. And the reason that I have Ty Johnson in my most impressive category instead of, just dominant players, for lack of a better word, is that he's got our attention now. I'm really curious to see if he can maintain it. I want to jump back to the K&D Rounds team that Sean Padula was on. There's a couple of names that I really could pick from as to like most surprising or pleasantly surprising players. I want to focus on Jonathan Pierre because this is a player that coming out of Belmont who has become like a feeder school for a lot of the bigger D1 programs out there. I watched him in warmups. Now, I'll go ahead and put this out here now. He was 0 of 5 from deep in the game, so this could mean absolutely nothing. But watching him in warmups, he did not miss a single shot. He was vibing the whole game. He was vibing before the game. He was really getting to know his teammates. He was kind of the levity on this team and really kind of an infectious personality, kind of like bringing all the guys together. And he was jawing against the other team. He took his matchups personally. He had 8 points on 3 of 8 shooting, was 2 of 2 from deep, had 6 rebounds. The biggest part of his game that impressed me was the 5 assists because these were not just DHO handoffs to a guard and let them go in and score. In transition, he was really effective throwing skip passes to his teammates for 3-point opportunities. He was able to pass out of the block to an open 3-point shooter. And then, yes, he was able to operate in these DHO sets. It was very effective game for him. And no one in the gym dunked and got a reaction more so than Jonathan Pierre. He had a couple of dunks in this game, got teed up really early on in the game. just to try to get his team kind of uplifted and to really bring the energy. And again, he got teed up for that, but it was such an emphatic jam that I don't think anybody was going to be really upset by that. The only other player in this game that I would say was most impressive, or like I'll say pleasantly surprised me, was Nate Santos out of Dayton, who had 14 points. He was 5 of 13 from the floor, 3 of 7 from deep, hit 1 free throw, had 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and no defensive metrics. But I was really just impressed by his energy. He was going after all sorts of rebounds. It didn't matter who he was going up against, like getting rebounds over the likes of guys like Juwan Roberts, David Joplin, Daniel Bacho, Ian Shefflin. He was really out there competing, and I viewed him more as like a three-point shooter, which he was. But Nate also competed on the glass, made timely passes, was really a connective guy for his team, and that's really kind of what helped them walk away with the victory, contributing with 14 points. Actually, he was second on his team in scoring. So that was my biggest impressions from the first game. It was a fun game, but the second one, which consisted of the Norfolk Sports Club, Davian Smith, Tamar Bates, Cam Carter, Tyson Dagenhart, Victor Lockan, Eric Reynolds, CJ Huntley, and Jamil Telfort all thrown onto one team. And whenever I looked at the rosters that were going to be in Portsmouth, I looked at this team and I said, I don't know how anyone's going to beat them. You know, that they ultimately ended up losing, but I thought that this roster was the one that consisted, I would say, of the best and most ready NBA talent. And I was just really impressed with the overall performance of some of these players. I want to start with Victor Lockan, who, again, I'm going to touch back to that Draft Sicko Bowl. If you want to have a very early drinking game, I suppose you could drink every time I mention that. But Victor Lockan was the player that Maxwell and I both thought was going to be the best player in this tournament. He was the number one overall pick in the Sicko Bowl. He was the highest ranked graded prospect on my big board, and he played like it. He was 8 of 9 from the floor, 2 of 3 from deep, totaling 18 points. He had 6 rebounds, 2 blocks, 2 steals, and an assist. And he made everything look so easy. There was just a constant outpour of production from Victor Lockan throughout the entire game. Some of these players had splashes. They had moments. There was a hot run where they got their points. Victor was just a constant outpour of dominance. He was matched up against some pretty, I would say, beefy big men, going up against Umar Ballo, David Ngusson, and Great Osabor. And I thought this was going to be a great test for him, because how is he going to hold up with the physicality of an Umar Ballo, of a Great Osabor, of a David Ngusson? All of these guys bring a level of physicality, a level of efficiency, just overall toughness and grit. How is Victor going to hold up? He did. There were 2 dunks that Umar Ballo had that I legitimately thought was going to bring down the backboard of this high school gymnasium. And after those 2 emphatic dunks, he went for a third against Victor Lockan. Victor's lateral mobility, which Maxwell and I both spoke on, we thought that, yes, he's not like the greatest vertical athlete, but he reads and reacts well. He's got great footwork. He slid in front of Umar Ballo, who was coming down with a 2-handed, slam. Lockan jumped up and challenged it with one hand and sent it backwards. And I was just blown away. That was probably his most impressive play to me. What else stood out to me was how well I think that he is going to translate to NBA style offenses, because he's, listed at about 6'11". He looked huge on the court. He didn't look smaller than that by any means. He's also listed at 240 pounds. I think he could obviously stand to get a little bit stronger. It was just so easy for me to envision him being in an NBA scheme on both ends of the floor. And I think that's what scouts are really going to take away from a game like this, because he was able to rotate and defend. He switched on to Zeke Mayo, who's a guard out of Kansas, on a couple possessions, and really just kind of closed the door on him from being able to drive or pass the ball in a meaningful way other than just kind of like a next pass over type of look. Victor on defense just really showed out. And then offensively, hit 2 3-pointers. I think that's what a lot of people are going to be most impressed with. But what stood out to me, what I thought was most meaningful for Victor's translation to the NBA, was that he actually brought the ball up the floor a couple of times and ran some DHO sets. And when I say bring the ball up the floor, it wasn't, okay, I'm going to dribble to half court, get challenged, and pass it. Like, he brought it up to the top of the key and then just kind of tracked along the perimeter to hand the ball off. So a little bit more than just like someone's coming, I'm going to pick up my dribble and pass it. It was more so in the sense that he looked comfortable bringing the ball up the floor and setting up the offense with people that he just has not played with. There are other Kentucky people that played in day one. None of them were on Victor's team. So he's playing with guys that run completely different sets and systems that what Victor is used to. And he was able to show a little bit more handling. And I think that with the NBA, what they want to see are players that can have the offense kind of continue to flow through them, that they're not just a play finisher, but they can be a play connector. Victor really showed out in that regard to me. And of course, he was tough on the glass. He showed great touch in the paint, getting hacked a lot and still being able to finish with touch and with great footwork. I think Victor is clearly going to be the guy of this crop from day one that has a real shot of being able to continue with NBA Combine settings moving forward. So he was the most impressive to me on that side. I want to swap to the Portsmouth partnership team, which consisted of Ace Baldwin, Jamal Meshack, Zeke Mayo, David Ngusson, Umar Ballo, RJ Felton, Matthew Cleveland, and Gray Osabor. Now, there's 2 players on this team that could have been like the most impactful player. RJ Felton could be one. I'm going to save him for pleasant surprises, kind of similar to that of like a T.Y. Johnson. I'm going to select Matthew Cleveland as the most impressive player from this team, who had 20 points on 7 of 11 shooting overall from the floor, was only 1 of 4 from 3, 5 of 7 from the free throw line, had 5 rebounds, 3 blocks, 2 steals, and that is all. That is all for the stats. The reason I wanted to bring up Matthew Cleveland was that he was a player that I drafted. Again, everyone drink your orange juice, who I drafted on the Sicko Bowl. And I thought that of all the players that I have kind of kept up with, touched on, maybe drifted away and gone back to review their film and their numbers, Matthew Cleveland might be the biggest example of neglect on myself. And I'm willing to bet that if I feel that way about myself, there are going to be other people who feel that way too. Going back and preparing for that Sicko Bowl episode, I really was blown away by some of the numbers that I just saw. And I was like, oh my goodness, this guy was once upon a time supposed to be a real draft prospect. I actually went back last night writing my article that's going to be up here in about an hour and a half. I went back and looked at the first like draft guide prep, big board stuff that I ever did. And this was when Matthew Cleveland was originally going to Florida State. I had him ranked in like my top 40 throughout that whole first year. And that was under a bad Florida State team that, hasn't really gotten any better in terms of like offensive creativity, but the defense was there. This guy, Matthew Cleveland, transfers away from Florida State, plays at Miami behind some really talented guys who are in the NBA now. Jordan Miller being one of them. I'm forgetting the guard with the cornrows. Why can't I remember? Isaiah Wong, thank you. He was on some really talented teams. And once those guys transferred, Miami brought in Jalil Bethea, who was supposed to be like everybody before the season started. Go back and listen, go back and look and read. A lot of people thought that Jalil Bethea was going to be a legit NBA talent in his his freshman season at Miami. That kind of went away, and I think so too did the consistent review of Matthew Cleveland. In this game, he was phenomenal. I mentioned he had 20 points on 7-11 shooting, only 1 of 4 from 3. Now, if you go back and look at Cleveland's shooting numbers, we know that he can shoot. This was his first day in this gym. Sometimes shooters, they get comfortable, whatever the case may be. He was 1 of 4 from 3. None of them were bad misses. At no point of watching him shoot the ball that I think he had no business taking any of the shots that he did. What really stood out to me, though, was the everything else part of his game. where, yes, he didn't get any assists, but he was very connective. He didn't stop and survey a lot. He played within the flow of the offense, and he was the aggressor. He was the guy consistently getting into the paint, finishing with some great body contortion and shielding to protect the ball, yet still being able to finish, hit a nice floater. He had an overall well-rounded offensive game, and I think that he can scale that back into being a reliable 3-and-D prospect where on defense, my goodness, this dude was just all over the place, shutting doors on ball handlers and drivers, anyone looking to advance the ball into the paint. Cleveland was there. He was fantastic on the point of attack, just on ball, off ball. Everything that this guy was supposed to be as a freshman, he's really starting to show now. And I think this was a great kind of quote unquote remember me performance for Cleveland. And I'm interested to see how he holds up throughout the rest of this, because at 6'7", about 210 pounds, if you can shoot the ball, if you can handle it, if you can attack the basket, if you can rebound, which he did. I mentioned that he had, let's see here, 5 rebounds, which was about 4th on his team. This team rebounded well. That's why they won the game. They were +7 rebounds. Cleveland crashed the glass and played incredible defense at 6'7", like a real 3-and-D prospect. Like, is the draft community, and I'm going to be the first to raise my hand, are we being negligent in our evaluation of Matthew Cleveland? I think that that's a fair assessment. Everybody that I talked to at this tournament, I brought up Matthew Cleveland before the game, that I was interested in seeing him. He really showed out. I spent a lot of time talking about it. I'm super passionate about it. I'm sorry. Let's talk about some players that really kind of piqued my interest, and I'm looking forward to see how they continue to play. The Norfolk Sports Club team, the team that had Victor Lockan, there's 2 other players that really stood out to me. Unfortunately, Jamil Telfort wasn't one of them. He had a rough shooting night, but he did get 11 points. He did contribute in some ways. But he, if I'm being honest, a guy that I really liked, just did not have a good first game. But Tyson Degenhart, another guy who put up a remember me performance, a guy who's always been very sound fundamentally, a guy who just plays his heart out, a guy who makes the right passes, who crashes the glass, who dives on the floor for loose balls. He's always been one of these guys that if he can only shoot it. Now, if you go and look, he's shot just under 35% at Boise State on a career high, I want to say around 4 3-point attempts per game. You saw a little bit of that throughout the year, and I think scouts were thrilled to see him go 3 of 3 from deep for 18 points. He had 2 steals, 5 rebounds, and an assist. And he looks huge on a basketball floor. I think he's listed at 6'8". If I can get my notes here real quick. I'm just going to fumble around with this piece of paper and see if I can find him, which I can. Yeah, he's listed at 6'8", 235 pounds. When he's standing on the court next to guys like CJ Huntley and Victor Lockan, who are 6'11", he doesn't feel like he is 3 inches shorter than those guys. And truth be told, he looks like he's 30 years old with his hair and a beard combination out there on the floor. I was telling everybody I was sitting next to, he looks like he's 30 years old. But he had a phenomenal performance for this game. Again, he was 7 of 9 from the floor overall, 3 of 3 from deep, and just played hard. He was going up against guys like David Ngusson, who is a big man playing for Kansas State, and Gray Osabor, who has had a couple of stops in college basketball. And he was unfazed by the size that he was matched up against. There was actually a couple of minutes where he was the team's 5, and I thought that that was really telling that his coach trusted him to go out there, utilize his strength, his reach, and flat-out athleticism that he brought to the floor. The thing that's always been the Achilles heel with the Tyson Degenhart is he's got to be able to shoot the ball, because he has a good handle for his size and position. He makes good plays with the ball, and he hustles. He's always out there hustling. If he could shoot it like he did in this night, 3 of 3 from deep, he could stand to benefit from a performance like this and maybe even get called up to more games. I want to also touch on Cam Carter, who was Tyson Degenhart and Victor Lockan's teammate for this game. A guy who, if you hear the name Cam and you hear that a guy named Cam play basketball on LSU, there's like a certain connotation that goes with he's just a hooper and he's not going to be able to do like winning stuff. Sure, this Cam kid from LSU might be able to shoot, might be able to score, and he might look great doing it, but what else can he do? Cam was one of these guys who I watched him and I came to that conclusion. Again, raising my hand, I thought that he was just going to come to a tournament like this and put up a bunch of shots. He only took 3 3-pointers and went 1 of 3. Similar to Matthew Cleveland, I'm not watching this 1 of 3 performance and thinking that Cam can't shoot. Again, the shots that he took were good, no bad misses. They came within the flow of the game. He wasn't trying to just kind of get himself going. He had a really strong, sturdy performance. And I trust that Cam is going to be a reliable shooter. What he did in this game that stood out to me was the 5 assists. He did have 5 turnovers. Norin Rad in the chat said he had 5 turnovers. He did. This, again, because the exhibition, lack of chemistry, a lot of players had mistakes that if you look on a box score, you're going to say, oh my gosh, like how could you have this turnover? There was one that Zeke Mayo just like completely whiffed on a pass. A lot of these turnovers I'm chalking up to chemistry and not being familiar with your teammates, right? I didn't feel that Cam did anything turnover-wise. Yes, he did lead his team and the entire game in turnovers, but the eye test thing that Norm brings up in the chat is true because it didn't feel like he did anything that was detrimental or jeopardizing to his team. He had 5 assists to go along with those turnovers, and those passes were actually pretty dynamic. At least 2 or 3 of them were. And the scoring in the paint is what really stood out. I mentioned he was 5 of 10 from floor, 1 of 3 from deep. He had some really good finishes in there, and his point of attack defense really stood out to me. I mean, this guy was going up against the likes of Ace Baldwin Jr., R.J. Felton on this team as well, and Zeke Mayo, Jamal Meshack. Meshack not really a downhill attacker, but the other 3 are. And Cam's point of attack defense on those guards really stood out to me. So I was expecting for him to come in and be a 3-point chucker. He didn't do that, but did everything else that contributes to meaningful basketball. And I was really just blown away by him. He's got my interest. I want to see if he carries it. Let's go over to the Portsmouth partnership team. Matthew Cleveland's teammate, R.J. Felton, who I mentioned earlier, was a guy I was going to touch back on, led these 2 games in scoring. He actually tied John L. Davis for most points across the entire first day. R.J. Felton was a player who I've been familiar with. He's played at ECU, a school that has put up some really good players. Son of R.J. Felton, or Raymond Felton, obviously. Looks huge on film. I was messaging Maxwell from the game, and he asked me if R.J. Felton looks as big in person as he does on film, and I said, yes, absolutely. And I mean this respectfully. There was a moment in the game on defense where he kind of rolled up his shorts like he was going to sink into his position and really just take it to whoever was lined up across from him. He rolled up his shorts and I saw his legs and my jaw hit the floor. And again, respectfully, I mean this because he's cut up. He's cock diesel out there. Big arms, big legs, just a physical specimen. So yeah, in person, R.J. Felton, just like he looks like a pro player. He's cut up. I was blown away by him because he had 22 points. He only had 1 rebound and 1 assist. This is why I wasn't the most impressed by him, but just pleasantly surprised because he was 9 of 13 from the floor, 4 of 6 from deep. His shooting motion just looks effortless. He gets a lot of lift on his shots. The shooting motion is pure. It's sweet. He's not super quick, but he's quick enough to kind of like turn the corner on a handoff or a pick and roll set and rise up and hit a shot. He also had a couple really neat finishes in the paint too. So my interest is piqued with R.J. Felton because similar to T.Y. Johnson, R.J. Felton was a late scratch for, I believe it's Augustus Marcialonis out of St. Mary's. I was hearing some words from the camp as to why he wasn't playing. So I don't know the official diagnosis. I don't want to get aggregated, but it appears that there's some sort of injury that's preventing Augustus from playing, obviously, because he was supposed to be on this team and he's not. From what I'm being told, he is actually still in Portsmouth taking interviews and stuff like that, meeting with teams, things of that nature. RJ Felton, and again, I think it was Rafael Barlow I saw on Twitter, who on the same day that he had this game, he had a 2-hour drive. Obviously, that's probably from the vicinity of Eastern Carolina. Had a 2-hour drive to go and participate at this tournament, and he tied with John L. Davis with the most points in this tournament, just from being super efficient from deep. It was fun to watch. My interest is piqued. I had very low expectations from him. A few people asked me what I thought about him, and I was like, yeah, he's okay. I didn't think that he was going to go out and, tie the entire night in scoring. So I'm curious to see if he holds up the scoring output. Maybe not even necessarily the entire output. Maybe the efficiency would be good to see, but I would like to see more on the defensive end. I would like to see more facilitation, things like that. So I'm interested to see if RJ Felton can do that. But everybody, that's going to wrap it up for me here. I don't really have much else. Start out, I believe, 3:15 p.m. Eastern time. There's going to be 3 games today instead of 2. I fully intend on staying up super late tonight, just like I did last night, writing a piece to show up on NoCeilingsNBA.com. I'll come back and do another day 2 recap. Today, I believe Jam Hines and Rich Thaman are supposed to be joining me here in Portsmouth, so you won't have to just listen to me. You'll be able to hear from other people as well. But I'm having a lot of fun here. Anybody who wants to follow me and kind of get my insights, hit me up. Want to even hang out, connect. Maybe you're watching and you're in Portsmouth yourself. I'm super, super happy to meet up with anybody. Just hit me up at Stephen G. Hoops. Follow us at No Ceilings NBA on all of our social medias. Hit us up at NoCeilingsNBA.com. One of the local media members that I met yesterday stumbled upon our work and was super happy with what we do. So that's always encouraging when you meet people who know what your work is and glean from that. So it's just been an encouraging time, but that's going to do it for me here. Everybody, thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you're here, I know that there's a lot of you watching right now. If you're watching on Twitter or X, please do us a favor. Go over to YouTube, like, share, and subscribe. At least go and hit a subscribe and a like. That goes a long way in helping us advance. If you're listening to us on your podcast feed and somehow you're not subscribed or following or haven't given us a rating, please do that. That also does a lot with helping us continue to expand our network and what we're able to do. Be able to go to events like Portsmouth and come back to you and give us our insights from inside the building. So that's going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for hanging out, and we'll catch up with y'all next time. Much love.